Steve Morgan stood still in front of the hospital nursery window, staring at the small, pink bundle moving in the bassinet. A lump formed in his throat as he watched his newborn daughter, Erin, who let out a soft cry. Just 3 days ago, he had buried his beloved wife, Sarah, who died after a very hard 2-day labor. The doctors had told them about the risks of a high-risk pregnancy at Sarah's age, but she, determined to have a child at 35, wanted to be a mother despite the risks. The pregnancy had been going well until Sarah went into labor. Steve remembered the moment the doctor came out of the delivery room looking very serious. "Mr. Morgan, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but we couldn't save her." The words had hit Steve hard, making him feel as if he'd been struck, and he collapsed onto the nearest chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Now, looking at his daughter, Steve felt a mix of intense love and deep sadness. How was he going to raise this child alone? How could he go on without Sarah? A nurse came over, holding Erin in her arms. "Mr. Morgan, it's time to take your daughter home," she said softly, handing the baby to his shaking hands. Steve looked down at Erin, her little face wrinkled in sleep. He knew he had to be strong for her and give her the love and care she needed. With a heavy heart, he left the hospital with his daughter, stepping into the unknown. When he got home, Martha, Steve's longtime housekeeper, was waiting anxiously at the front door. As soon as he walked in, Martha rushed to him, her arms ready to hold the baby. "Oh, let me see the little angel," she cooed, taking Erin from Steve's arms. "She's absolutely precious, Mr. Morgan, and she looks just like Mrs. Morgan." Bless her soul, Steve's heart tightened at the mention of his late wife. He looked at Erin, trying to see the resemblance. But all he could feel was the heavy weight of his sadness. Martha seemed to notice his pain and put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I know it's tough, Mr. Morgan, but remember, this is your daughter. She's part of you and Mrs. Morgan. You need to be strong for her." Steve nodded, fighting back the lump in his throat. "I know, Martha, it's so hard without Sarah, I understand, Mr. Morgan, but you're not alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way," Martha reassured him. Her words were a small comfort, but Steve knew he had a long road ahead. A month had passed since Steve brought Erin home, and he was overwhelmed. Night after night, Erin's loud cries echoed through the house, leaving Steve tired and desperate for a solution. He had called the pediatrician twice, seeking advice on how to calm his inconsolable daughter. Dr. Larson assured him that Erin was perfectly healthy and suggested that her constant crying might be due to Steve's deep sadness and depression over Sarah's death. "Babies are very sensitive, Mr. Morgan, Dr. Larson explained over the phone. "Erin can feel your sadness because of the strong bond between father and daughter. My advice is to hold her close, take her for walks, and try your best not to show you're upset around her." Steve sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. He knew the doctor was right, but it was easier said than done. Every time he looked at Erin, he was reminded of the love he had lost and the future that had been taken from him. Determined to follow Dr. Larson's advice, Steve started taking Erin for daily walks in the park near their home, hoping the fresh air and new environment would soothe her and maybe bring him some peace. During one of their walks, Steve noticed a young girl, no older than 7, coming through a hole in the fence. She had a playful look in her eye as she skipped toward them, her worn dress fluttering in the breeze. "Hi there," the girl chirped, looking into Erin's stroller. "What a cute baby," Steve smiled, surprised by her friendliness. "Thank you. Her name is Erin." "I'm Steve, and you are?" "I'm Jessica," she replied, grinning. "I live in the orphanage on the other side of the fence. I like to sneak out sometimes to explore." Just then, Erin began to cry louder. Steve reached for her, but Jessica was quicker. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the baby. Steve paused, then nodded. He watched in awe as Jessica gently picked up Erin, holding her in her small arms. "Shaish. It's okay," Jessica soothed, rocking Aaron back and forth. "Sometimes babies just need to be held a certain way. Try laying her on her side like this." To Steve's astonishment, Aaron's cries quieted almost instantly. He looked at Jessica, filled with gratitude and curiosity. "How did you know to do that?" he asked, amazed by her knack. Jessica shrugged, a sad smile on her face. "I used to have a baby sister," she began, then stopped, her eyes clouding with sadness. Steve felt there was more to her story but chose not to ask. Instead, he offered to buy her an ice cream cone as a thank you. From then on, Steve and Jessica met daily in the park. Jessica's calming presence seemed to soothe Aaron, and Steve began to look forward to their meetings. As they spent more time together, Jessica slowly shared her tragic past about losing her family in a car accident a few months ago. Steve's heart ached for her, seeing the familiar pain of loss in her eyes. He felt an unexpected connection with her, both bound by their grief. One afternoon, Steve went to the park with Aaron, eager for their usual meeting with Jessica. However, as time passed, Jessica didn't show up. Concerned, Steve waited with a restless Aaron in his arms. After an hour, he went to the orphanage to find out what was wrong. The orphanage director met him with a worried look. "Mr. Morgan, I have some troubling news," she said, her voice heavy. Jessica was badly hurt by some of the other kids last night. They were jealous of the gifts and attention you've been giving her. Steve's heart sank, overwhelmed with guilt. "Is she okay? Where is she now?" "She's recovering in the hospital," the director answered, her tone kinder now. "Mr. Morgan, I must caution you," the director said seriously. "Your visits with Jessica, while well-intentioned, may be causing more harm than good. She's been through a lot, and forming attachments only to have them broken can be unhealthy for a child in her situation." Steve nodded, understanding the director's concerns. He knew he had to be careful not to give Jessica false hope, but he also couldn't stand the idea of leaving her, especially after all she had done for him and Aaron. In the days following Jessica's hospitalization, Steve wrestled with a decision that would alter his life. The more he thought about Jessica, who had brought light into his darkest days, the more he felt his future was tied to hers. With a clear purpose, Steve spoke to Martha, his eyes full of resolve. "Martha, I've made a decision," he said firmly. "I'm going to adopt Jessica." Martha's face brightened with surprise and joy. "Oh, Mr. Morgan, that's wonderful news," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "It's a beautiful idea, and I know Mrs. Morgan would be so proud of you for opening your heart again." Steve smiled, feeling a wave of peace for the first time since Sarah's passing. "I want to convert the guest room into a second nursery for Jessica. Can you help me with that, Martha?" "Of course, Mr. Morgan. I'll get started right away," Martha replied, her eyes filling with tears of happiness. As Steve began making the arrangements for Jessica's adoption, he felt both excitement and nervousness. He knew that raising two young girls as a single father would be challenging, but he was ready to face the future with a renewed sense of hope and commitment. When the day came to bring Jessica home from the hospital, Steve felt a flutter of anticipation. He entered her room, a bouquet of colorful balloons in hand, and was greeted by Jessica's beaming face. "Steve," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Steve sat down on the edge of her bed, taking her small hand in his. "Jessica, I have something important to ask you," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "How would you feel about coming to live with me and Aaron permanently, as a family?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears, her lower lip quivering. "You mean you want to adopt me?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Steve nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "More than anything, Jessica. You've brought so much joy and light into our lives, and I can't imagine my family without you in it." With a cry of pure happiness, Jessica threw her arms around Steve's neck, hugging him tightly. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she exclaimed, her face wet with tears of joy. As Steve held Jessica close, he felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced since Sarah's passing. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Jessica and Aaron by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges life had in store. 1 year later, Steve stood in the backyard of his home, watching Jessica and Aaron play together on a colorful picnic blanket. The sun was shining and the air was filled with laughter and the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Martha emerged from the house carrying a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Look at you, mister. Morgan," she said, her eyes twinkling with pride. "A year ago you were a man drowning in grief, and now look at the beautiful family you've created." Steve smiled, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Martha," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've been a rock for us through everything." As he watched his daughters play, Steve felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that Sarah was looking down on them from above, smiling at the family they had become. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered, his eyes misting with tears. "Thank you for giving me the strength to love again, to create this beautiful life with our daughter and with Jessica. I promise to cherish every moment and to make you proud every day." With a heart full of love and a future bright with promise, Steve gathered his daughters into his arms, ready to embrace the joys and challenges of parenthood and to create a lifetime of precious memories as a family united by love, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of the heart.